Not yet. Tom, you could pause it.
Welcome everyone to Climate Change, Reimagining, and Reengineering New Jersey. As I make my preliminary remarks here, introducing this session, folks will continue to funnel in the room so that it will allow everyone a couple minutes to join us. This is the first in a series of new training programs centering on climate change education. The series is hosted by the New Jersey School Boards Association in collaboration with the New Jersey Department of Education's Inspiration to Innovation program, Rutgers Center for Mathematics, Science, and Computer Education, the New Jersey Department of Children and Families, and the U.S. Army. During this series, our thought leaders will focus on issues such as the science of climate change, how we study a changing climate, sustainability solutions such as solar, wind, and hydrogen, fuel cells, and other specialty topics. We have several speakers joining us today. I'm going to just introduce one of them who's going to get us started. John Henry, Senior Manager of STEAM and Sustainable Schools at the New Jersey School Boards Association. Before John gets started, let me just mention we do have a chat feature on the webinar. If you have questions as we get going, please feel free to enter them in the chat. We will answer them as we can as we go along, and any questions we don't get to, we will save for the end. And if for some reason our time gets cut short and your question doesn't get answered, we will try to follow up with you after this session so you get the answers that you need. And also please stay tuned to our member portal so you can sign up for the additional sessions in this series. With that, I'd like to turn it over to John.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate the introduction. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see everybody again. So this slide, just if you could just make note, Tom went over a few things, but if you could put your name, your title, and your district into chat so we know who's in the room. We will be monitoring a chat. And of course, hopefully with the 90-minute session here, we should have time to answer most questions. And if not, we can be available by email. So thank you. So I just want to introduce our NJSBA team here. And Jen, if you're still on, if you would like to introduce yourself as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Seal. I am the STEAM Tank Manager for New Jersey School Boards Association. I also work with member services and STEAM and sustainable programs with Mr. Henry every day. He's my partner in crime. Welcome, everybody. I hope everyone enjoys today's presentation.
Thanks, Jen. And we do work with Captain Andrew Becker from the U.S. Army. He is part of our STEAM. He is our STEAM fellow. He was unable to make it today. David, you want to take it for the Rutgers or meet our Rutgers team?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Dave Chernoff, Director of the Center of Mathematics, Science, and Computer Education, as well as Associate Professor of Educational and School Psychology at Rutgers. Overall, the mission of the CMSCE, our center, is to improve education in STEM and STEAM in New Jersey and beyond. Mainly through teacher professional development. And since our inception about 34 years ago, long before the climate change standards, and even before iSTEM and iSTEAM were on the map, our center was charged with primarily with interdisciplinary collaborations in mathematics, science, and technology, reaching across multiple schools and departments, and also involving members of the business, educational, and policy communities. Of course, climate change is a quintessential transdisciplinary topic, so we're really happy to be a part of the conversation.
Thank you, David. Edward, you're muted.
I actually just finished a PD in a school, so I just had the teachers leave and I can join you all. So thanks for having me. I'm the assistant director at the center. My background is science. I was a science teacher, vice principal, science supervisor at the district level. I was a district STEAM supervisor, so I love science. My dissertation is actually in climate change education using the greenhouse effect and computer simulations to teach climate change education. So I'm really excited to be here with you all. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ed. Brielle?
Hi all, I'm Brielle Kuchelik. I'm the Senior iSTEM Coordinator for the center. I help with coordinating different professional development in programs, working with teachers and students.
Awesome. And Karen?
Hi everyone, I'm Carrie Ferraro. I am also at Rutgers in a different center, in the Math and Science Learning Center. I am an assistant professor of practice, and I am in charge of the Rutgers Science Explorer, which goes to middle schools throughout the state of New Jersey, and scientists work with the youth on real world problems, interdisciplinary problems. And we also have some exhibits and tours here at the Math and Science Learning Center in Piscataway as well. And my background is in oceanography and climate change, so I'm excited to be here today. And
Thank
education.
And Chris, I know you're on. I know Mike is on. So if you could be kind enough to introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Chris Cox. I work in the Office of Innovation here at the Department of Education as a educational technology coordinator.
Thank you, Chris. And Mike?
Mike, whoop, yeah.
Okay,
I
on?
can do it.
Go to the front.
Hi, I'm Mike Petita. I'm a former teacher, 17 years, technology engineering. Now I'm currently the STEM coordinator at the Department of Education.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So we have additional partners, and we've been working with Rutgers, New Jersey School Boards Association's been working with Rutgers for quite some time now, at least the last 4 years. We've done the RUI STEAM Ready series, where we've been focusing mostly on maker spaces and iSTEAM, iSTEM, integrative education. But the climate change standards has kicked in. There's a lot going on with climate change, and we thought that we could put something together here to guide some board members and also schools in some resources, and also from a board level decisions, so we're going to go into. So I'm going to turn it back to David, who's going to talk about this for just a minute.
Oh, okay, sure, John. Yeah, I'll talk just broadly about our partnership, and then I'm going to let Brielle and Eddie speak to this slide. So yeah, several years ago, a formal partnership developed between NJSBA and the Rutgers Division of Continuing Studies, where our center resides. And originally, Rutgers started helping NJSBA to convert some of their PD offerings to online, because the whole Rutgers Online Learning department also exists within this Division of Continuing Studies. And ever since, our group has worked pretty closely with John and his group to try to get out STEAM and STEM educational best practices. So each of us, we do a lot of things individually, but we've learned that we're even stronger together. A partnership which includes the Army, giving us some nice broad reach. And one of the partnership's long-term goals is to create an LMS, which has been dubbed STEAM Tank 360, as a portal of communication, community building, and a clearinghouse of resources around integrated STEAM and some of the STEAM tanks developments as they occur. So I don't know if Eddie or Brielle, you want to speak a little bit more to some of the center's partnerships and offerings here in the slide.
Sure, John, can you click that link for us on in district, out of district? Or can I share my screen?
I can click the link.
Perfect. So our center does PD for districts. We actually just changed this today. So if you look at the top, we have professional development for teachers, professional development for districts. So looking at districts, we do full half-day PDs. And if you just want to scroll down, will you do anything in the STEM related field? I'm just going to highlight the climate change. So if John, you click on science for us. And if you scroll down, there's our science PDs, and the bottom left is our newest one I actually did on Friday at a district. And that was for climate change. and we looked at for non-science teachers, what do we need to know to teach climate change? What's the general background in climate change for all? If you just want to click on that sample agenda for us, John. Thank you. So here's what we did on Friday. It was at VOTEC and EB. And then we looked at kind of the major ideas of heat change over the past 150 years, emissions. The really cool thing with COVID, even though COVID is horrible, is the fact that climatologists could now see what actually would happen if we did reduce the energy in our cars and our boats and our planes, and what does the atmosphere look like? And they were shocked how fast the atmosphere kind of rebounded quickly, and how fast the change was in 3 weeks. We looked at the data for that with teachers. We looked at some of the drawdown framework and the climate standards, which we'll look at right now with you all. But this is a PD that we just created and did on Friday. So, we'd be happy to bring it to districts to kind of help teachers who are non-science folks be ready and prepared to actually teach climate change, which has to be done by 2022, the start in the fall, which teachers were kind of surprised to learn about. So John, if you want to go back to the slides. Thank you. And then here's the feedback from the PD, best PD ever, really informative, lots of great resources, only issues finding time. And then the bottom is when asking about future support, the teacher said, this training is going to have to be done again when my colleagues find out that they have to teach climate change too. So actually none of the teachers knew ahead of time that they were supposed to teach climate change. They just signed up for the PD because they were excited about the topic. And then during the PD, I share with them that 2022 in the fall is a rollout for climate change across all subject areas. And they were a little surprised.
So Eddie, what's really interesting about this and the reason why we wanted to do this through school boards is because the decision makers are going to have to obviously take a look at this on how they're going to approve certain kind of curriculum. They're going to approve professional development and there's a lot of stuff out there right now. And there's a lot of chatting and a lot of talk about climate change education and how to do it. Not to mention that now we're going beyond the science teachers. Now we have climate change standards are in 7 content areas. Those teachers currently, as far as I know, are not content experts in climate change. So there's going to be a lot of professional development that's going to be needed. And this is one of the reasons why we were doing this, so that as board members, what's out there, at least kind of the tip of the iceberg, at least resources here, but there are others. And we're going to introduce some other collaborative partners a little bit further down.
And if you want to go to the next slide, we'll kind of briefly just show the standards that are out now for the other content areas. So that'd be the next slide. Oops.
Oh, no, it's down. Oh,
we
no, we moved it.
Eddie, we did a little re-editing of the slide deck. So
I'll be quiet now then.
No, no, Eddie, it's good that you brought that up because we are going to show where the climate change standards are and what the Department of Education is doing to support that. And they have a nice page that they've created with resources and all of that. But I did mention we have additional partners. These are just a few of additional partners that we're working with right now. So just so you know that there are other folks on who are doing a lot about it. And this is only, again, like I said, only the tip of the iceberg here. So, why are we doing this? Climate change is a problem. The Department of Environmental Protection Agency did a climate change report. And so this is actually talks about how New Jersey is really vulnerable to climate change. And we actually are seeing some pretty significant changes right here in the Garden State. That is a concern. But when we talk about iSTEAM and iSTEM, we're looking at real world situations that the students can address in those 7 content areas and have hands-on learning using, first of all, the building as a teaching tool, but also certain parts of the state right now that are vulnerable to climate change, and having students actually address these situations in aligning to those standards. So this slide, you're going to see a second time later on down when Carrie talks, but this is kind of important. And I know this goes a little granular right now, but if you take a look at some of the things that are going on with climate change, this is important. And as board members, part of your role is to keep your school healthy and to keep the kids healthy. Know that these things are kicking in. And this is probably, again, Carrie, and correct me if I'm wrong, the tip of the iceberg in terms of what things are happening right now. The science is pretty compelling. We've been looking at this for a long time. I used to work with NASA. NASA has so much data, NOAA and all these big agencies and universities. The information is compelling. So Eddie, this is, and I'm going to talk about our guidance document in just a minute. Most of you on here may have received a copy of it, but this is taken right out of the document, which actually talks about climate change resources that are available from the Department of Ed. And their website clearly goes over a bunch of strategies and things that you can do right now. I don't know, Eddie, if you want to talk about the standards a little bit more and the resources, or you want to wait until a little bit later?
We can wait till later. That makes more sense, I think.
Okay. But just know that the Department of Ed has resources, and Chris and Mike can talk about it a little bit later, but just know that this is available on the Department of Ed. They've spent a lot of time doing this out of the science department. So, and in September 2022, that was mentioned, schools are going to be asked to implement climate change education. And in order to do that, School Boards Association teamed up with Sustainable Jersey and others to put together a thought leader committee on climate change education. And that committee was composed of about 26 individuals representing NJEA, PTA, most of the educational organizations. We put together a report and actually launched that report on February 28th, which has a bunch of information in it. And also it had identified 4 key needs. And I'm going to go into the key need that really concentrates on board members only. But from this thought leader committee, and after the report was launched, we put together what's called the New Jersey Climate Change Education Initiative that is currently underway. And what that will do is kind of aggregate and collect a lot more resources beyond what the Department of Education is doing currently. We've also are working with Subject to Climate with their national web database with lessons and resources that is in progress. What they will do with us in collaboration of our partners is make it New Jersey specific, climate change resources and lessons that will be just New Jersey. There will be others as well, but we really wanted to make this New Jersey, and that's what is underway right now. Moving forward, later on down, possibly a year from now or so, what we would like to do is actually form the New Jersey Climate Change Education Coalition. We don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but the coalition will be not only the folks on this, but meeting today, but many others that will have like one-stop shopping as a coalition. Instead of it being the wild, wild west of climate change, we kind of want to wrangle everything in to make sure our districts in the state of New Jersey have the resources, the professional development, the curriculum that they need to implement the standards moving forward. So this is the cover of the report on K-12 climate change education that, like I said, has released. If you don't have a copy of this,
John, John actually just put it in the chat. I just dumped it into chat for you. So
Okay,
everyone
good,
has it
thank you.
available.
Thank you. It's also embedded in a slide deck to it
Awesome.
at the end of these next few slides. But just so you know, if you haven't seen this yet, this is the table of contents. And if you look at like now page 29 starts key needs support for board members. So for you board members on there, if you want some guidance on how you can actually support climate change education in your district, we give a little bit of guidance on that. And just real quickly on how you can support climate change education. You can evaluate your current policies and strategic plan. You can look at board goals, things of that nature. You're going to be approving climate change education, professional development. Board members themselves can take additional climate change education that in the future, School Boards Association, in collaboration with their partners, will be offering so that you can at least have a 101 understanding of climate change. And here's why. You may encounter some of the public asking the reasons why we're doing climate change education in the schools. And hopefully you will have some tools to be able to address those questions in public forum. And that is an important factor as your role as a board member to be able to communicate effectively and intelligently with the public. Again, going back to professional learning opportunities for staff members. They will need to be trained, especially the ones that are non-science teachers. There may be budgetary issues when it comes up in terms of purchasing books and media and things of that nature that you may have to make decisions on. So these are all embedded in the document with the link that Jen just put in the chat. Addressing workforce development needs. This is a rising hot topic in New Jersey right now. So they're called green collar jobs or green collar careers. And so there are always going to be a lot of opportunities, New Jersey specific, like offshore wind and energy and electric vehicles, things like that, which our students will have opportunities to look at in career pathways, not only going to universities and colleges, but also in the career and technical education to learn how to get into the green collar economy. So these are some things that, you know, we're also going to feature in the future as well. And there's the link to it. Jen put it in the chat. If you haven't taken a look at the document, please do. And we are also open for suggestions. If you do go through this document and you see something that stands out that is either missing or can be included in a future revision document, please send us an email. We are happy to consider that for future reference. I'm going to turn it over to Chris and Mike to talk about what they're doing at the Department of Ed right now in terms of some of the initiatives, some of the things that are going on. I know, Chris, you know a little bit about ESSER money and funding and things that are happening with climate change education within the Department of Ed. So if I could call upon you now.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, there's a lot going on. There's also been a kind of restructuring in my office. So unfortunately, with some recent changes, I may not be the most qualified to answer this, especially in this particular forum. We do have some amazing partnerships with the school boards, with the Inspiration to Innovation, which is, you know, taking a look at solving real world pandemic and educational related problems with kind of that steam tank approach, which is kind of an exciting effort. There are a lot of exciting changes starting to happen around climate change that I'm not quite authorized to speak in depth about yet, but as an office, we're really excited. Gilbert Gonzalez is the new director of the Office of Innovation, and I think he has a lot of new exciting ideas and initiatives that he plans on bringing to our office and hopefully sharing soon publicly. I think at this point, that's about what I can share directly from our office. Obviously, the Office of Standards has been doing a lot of work to support climate change, but I can't really speak to what their office is currently doing. So, John, I hate to give a slightly vague answer, but there's been kind of a little bit of a reshuffling in the deck here at the Department of Ed, and I just I don't want to overshare what isn't mine to share.
Chris, I totally understand, and we're just happy that you're on and people get to see who you are and what you represent. And Chris has been doing some phenomenal work with us for quite a number of years. And I'm sure when this information is ready to be announced, Gilbert will release that and you'll be available for, you know, questions along with Mike as the STEM coordinator. You know, so just wanted everybody to meet you, to know that there is an office, you know, of innovation, and they are going to be focusing on, at least from what I understand, climate change and putting that STEM kind of twist on it, which I think is a great way for engaging students and to getting students into the kind of hands-on, minds-on learning, really focus on sustainability and climate change issues. So
yeah, I appreciate you giving an opportunity and introducing us. I see a lot of friendly faces and good friends in the room, and I appreciate you including us in this meeting. I just, you know, Gilbert is probably going to be the best person to share on behalf of the Department of Ed.
And Chris,
We
I think
do.
everybody understands that, when there's change within the DOE, it slows down a little bit until things resettle. So we get it, but it's okay. And I have to give a shout out for Chris and Mike Petita for being Steam Tank judges. And they have been supporting the student presentations in Steam Tank, because right now we're in the middle of judging over 350 teams. And they have been a huge support on that. And I'm really looking forward to working with you guys on inspiration and innovation too, which are mini challenges. And we're going to kick it off when we're at that point with the climate change challenge. And that will be available hopefully, in a couple months down the road, but stay tuned for that.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, John. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate you providing us an opportunity.
We actually do have our first question today, and so I'll just pose it to the group.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
The question is, will county superintendents be given professional development information that can be disseminated to their administrators?
The shorter answer is yes. Part of the initiative, the New Jersey Climate Change Education Initiative, we will be developing specific climate change education for leadership, not just board members, but superintendents as well. And again, if it depends on what the superintendents want to learn, we're going to kind of keep it at a leadership level, but they could do a deeper dive and go into what is available in terms of curriculum, professional development, what to teach, 101 science, stuff like that Rutgers will be doing, and also many other partners also have available.
And I do know that the Office of Standards has been working with the county offices to put together, not just updates for climate change, but also computer science and the standards in general. So I think that'll be part of a much larger bundle.
And we also have a question and also somewhat of a comment, and it comes from Ari Donio, who asks, "It seems to me that climate change might fall under the definition of controversial subject. How would teachers present other sides of climate change?"
Well, that's a really good question. I know how I would do it in a classroom. You leave it to the students to have a debate about it, to weigh out the pros and cons, do the data collection on the real science versus what's media, and let them have at it. That is one way. Rutgers folks, any comments on that?
I guess I was thinking that, yes, it's somewhat controversial there, and in some ways not. I mean, or surprisingly not, even because for the fact that it is, talked about in the political context, and therefore another interesting approach could be to encourage the classes or students to reflect on what parts are not controversial and what parts are, and maybe debate the parts that are, and see if there is room, for agreement where that agreement lies.
Yeah, I think these are all great points. I'd just like to, echo Dave's point about really focusing on how, 98% of scientists believe this is happening. And I know, that doesn't necessarily convince people, but also bringing in data is a really good way to convince people if they're able to actually look at and analyze the data themselves. That might also help. I also put a link in the chat to a website called in the Clean Network, and they have a whole page on how to support teachers if there's controversy. So I recommend you check that out.
And I would add to what Carrie says, definitely data. I always had students analyze data. Some kids are skeptical of where the data came from. We used to look at data from around the world, not just the US, but look at, worldly submissions of data. And then mini labs in the classroom that would correlate with the data and say, hey, here's what the data says. Let's take dry ice, put it into the water, see how much that CO2 actually gets absorbed by that water, over time. Does the data make sense based on what we can replicate in our classroom? And I think that really helps as well with, giving that data some experience for the kids.
I hope that helps with that question a little bit. Okay, so how does the iSTEAM and integrative STEM STEAM work with this? So we like to talk about design thinking and developing a maker mindset in K-12 education and looking at the New Jersey standards requirements, not just climate change, but also in the 8.1, 8.2, looking at all this information. And I think what's really important here on this is when you look at climate change education or sustainability in general, the students are engaging in real world problem solving, going back to the data collection and what is actually going on with biodiversity and ecological systems. This is a great time to actually engage the students in this kind of design, invention, problem solving through that lens, but using the environment as the laboratory. And we know, again, like we said in the beginning of this presentation, is that we want to make this New Jersey specific and isolate some situations that are occurring because of climate change that's based on science, and have the students really go through this particular lens. Rutgers folks want to comment on this and answer it, David? I think you do.
Yeah, I just wanted to say in that last bullet there, and that is a live link as well. It doesn't matter that we really go there. I can put it into the chat. But in the last year or two, Rutgers has tried to address these design thinking, the need for professional development in the design thinking standards by starting a graduate certificate in maker education. It is a 10, actually, we're seeking approval for a 15 credit certificate program. We're in our second cohort, and so far it has gone, very, very well. Some of what the participants have been able to do has been really impressive, in terms of transforming school libraries into maker spaces and things like that. So showing the potential for some nice impact in New Jersey schools. It can be completed in a year or less. There's no prerequisite. I will put the link in the chat.
Thank you, David. Another way to engage students too is, and we thought we would share this, is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And there are 17 categories. This is a great place for students to engage in, again, design thinking and problem solving through these particular topics that have been identified by the Sustainable Development Goals in the organization. Also, Project Drawdown is another great place to go to look at what they have identified in some critical needs, the things that need to be addressed in the next, say, 15 to 20 years. So these are great places to start and actually align to the Department of Education standards. So just wanted to share this resource as well. So when we talk about iSTEAM, the integrative approach, it's really about integrative education, where the students are really focusing on the nature of, reality and the complexities of life, and more about the process. It's definitely beyond STEM and STEAM content areas. The students experience some failure as part of the process, and they use unsustainable situations as a learning opportunity. With integrative education, I always love this, is because it doesn't necessarily have a content area attached to it, and it's not a subject, dividing on, subjects. And I think that's where students get confused sometimes, as they're going from one subject to the next. It's really just addressing real world situations, and the environmental situations that are going on right now are great places for students to start. All right, so I believe, Eddie, I think you're gonna kick in the standards here. Mute, you're on mute.
It's working not in your office is rough.
Yeah,
Do you want to
that's
click on that first link for us? So as I said before, 2020, the standards came out. 2022, September is when they're supposed to be implemented. If you click on the left side, well, let's take a second here actually and show everyone. So we have climate change, the actual grade bands on the left, and the interdisciplinary connections are on the right. I used both of these at my PD on Friday. The teachers never saw it before. None of the teachers in the room saw these before. Just so you know, as board members, the teachers are not familiar with these that I'm aware of so far. But if you want to click on the climate change standards on the left side, the grade band, you want to scroll down a little bit. So we have our drop down here. We have grade 2, 3 to 5, 6 to 8. Let's look at high school, the 9 to 12. I think we want to check out real quick. So you'll see visual and performing arts. If you keep scrolling, John, I don't want to spend too much time, but we have kind of these enduring under standards, performance expectations. Scroll a little bit more. Health and phys ed. I'll be honest, the best conversation I had on Friday was with our health and phys ed teachers. They were so engaged and so excited. I was sharing about the floors that move and the floors that you get energy from walking on them, and they have the technology out. And the teachers are so excited about using that in their curriculum. And we plan lessons around, how much energy can we capture using devices where we had 100 kids in the gym running on the basketball court? What would that look like? How much energy we would save? So I think the teachers are really excited once they realize what the standards and expectations are. The science ones, the science teachers are pretty comfortable, I believe, at this point with their standards relating to climate change. Then we can scroll down a little bit more. A lot of science ones. And then social studies, we had interesting conversations with social studies. They were looking at more the equity piece, which I think comes up a lot in climate change. I taught in Piscataway. I used to tell folks, I live in a flood zone in Middlesex Borough. A lot of you live in flood zones in Piscataway. It's not that your parents, are dumb. It's just the fact that, the cheaper houses, are in flood zones. What does that mean? Who's living in these flood zones? What does that look like from an equity standpoint? Who is climate change affecting, around the world? So a lot of the social studies conversations we're having came up with, the economic piece, which is that first part. And then politicians, right? How much as students can we change? How much does our local government change? How much does our state government change? How much do nations change? And looking at, from a global kind of local, are the words I like to use a lot, local versus global, who can do what to kind of make changes in our environment. In the chat, Yelena, if I said your name right, said, can people really control climate or only environment? So about people controlling things, it comes into the government piece and the human impact and what can we actually do? We can modify our environment. We can put Christmas trees at the Jersey Shore to collect sand, to reduce the erosion and build up our sand dunes for the next storm. It's something we can do to change our environment. How do we change climate? You have carbon scrubbers, you have ways to collect carbon and devices that do that now. You can plant more trees, which are collecting carbon. So that's another way to kind of affect climate. But that's kind of all the conversations we had around social studies. You want to scroll down a little bit more, John? Sorry. I get really excited about this topic, if you can't tell.
I couldn't tell it.
And then we have the world language folks. Oh man, we had amazing conversations with world language teachers. They were so engaged. Just think about global and different countries and where the kids are coming from. I also taught in Morristown, where we had a large population of students from Honduras. Talking about climate change there versus the US, and what we can build and engineer and design here versus what they're doing there. Are really engaging conversations. I think in foreign language kind of brings out, that location of the spoken language and what countries they are from naturally, kind of comes out with what's happening with climate change. And the one thing you won't notice, folks, is math and English actually isn't on this list currently. So right now for 2022, as the way the standards were lined up, math and English isn't a piece that has to implement right away. We're thinking, next year, 2023, but we're not sure about that yet from the state, just so people are aware. And then design thinking, Dave mentioned our course. I taught the design thinking courses last year. We're really looking at, we have a summer camp as well for design thinking and maker spaces. But if you're designing solutions to the problem of climate change, what does that look like? How are we brainstorming? How are we creating these solutions? What can we change? What can't we change? What are our costs? Cost ratio benefits are things we look at when you go back to math class and economics. Katrina, that the levy was built for a category 3, not a category 5, because it was decided that at some point in time that the cost benefit ratio is to build for a category 3. Those are conversations we have in classes. And then Brielle, I'm going to let you jump on and do the cross interdisciplinary part.
Or if you don't mind going back one, John. Thank you. Or, oh, I meant, if you can go back to the previous tabs. Yeah. So the sample interdisciplinary connections, if you'll click on that one for me. Thank you. And you scroll down and then you'll be able to see. So again, you can pick a grade band. And if you go into that grade band, 9 through 12 is totally fine. You're going to see kind of the overarching questions and the rationale for the different performance expectations. And then it shows the connections that it has within the different content areas. So bringing in that integration, that cross-curriculum collaboration within the standards as well for it. And then other parts of the website, we don't have to go through all of it, but they do have resources just in general. So they have links to different sites that showcase climate change with lessons, with different organizations as well that are in there. So they're constantly, every time we've been going to the website lately and using it for PDs, it's been kind of tweaked and changed and updated a little bit, but it is a nice kind of overview to be able to look at and see that they are adding a lot of different resources for teachers, for admin, for the school districts to be able to start using for it. I don't know if there's anything else, Eddie, you wanted to add in with that.
I would just say from the training, it was helpful to have groups kind of sit next to each other and say, you know, we have science teachers in the room, we have math teachers together, you know, what are we doing in class? We're looking at the science behind it, and we're looking at the economics behind it. We talk about flood zones, and I'm reading the chat, people are, you know, about Ida and how it's, and I live in Somerset, you know, how much it flooded Somerset County. I'm looking at the costs of that compared with the science behind it. And then someone else asked in class, you know, what if we don't use permeable surfaces? And what, you know, what are the rules in California versus New Jersey with solar? And, you know, when you're building structures. So I think that interdisciplinary approach, when you have those teachers sitting around and having that conversation, you know, they were getting excited about, oh, you know, you can do this in your class, I can do this in my class. You know, how cool would it be if we, you know, talked about the rules? Like some towns have a rule where if you cut down a tree, you have to replace it with 3 trees, you have to pay $300. You know, when we talk about carbon sequestration and flooding and erosion, if you're going to cut down these trees that are holding these areas of hills up, you know, what is the town rule with that? But those conversations all came out with an interdisciplinary discussion when you have all the teachers sitting together in the same room.
It's also a good learning tool. Like we talk about solar energy at a district level, maybe the students can use the building as a teaching tool, right? And actually have some conversations about how much solar energy or photovoltaic cells actually are needed to generate like maybe 10 or 20% out of the power needed for the schools. So the board, even though it's a board decision, that doesn't mean it's going to eliminate the students from actually participating in some of the planning phases and doing the math and doing the weighing out the benefits and the cost of in an installation like that.
And I won't say what school I was in, but we actually had our windows all tinted one year because they were saying if we tint the windows, you reduce the energy coming in, the heat energy coming in, to reduce the overall cost of heating and cooling the building. And we actually took energy temperatures, you know, the kind you use on your head now for COVID, to measure temperature. We looked at the windows that were tinted and not tinted at different times of the day to get data of how much sunlight was coming in, what was the temperature of those windows outside the window. And then we put devices inside. We put sand and black and different types of material and measure the temperature of those materials with and without the tint. And that was an 8th grade science lesson. The kids loved it because they were like, I can't believe they tinted our school. I think it was hilarious. I'm like, but no, look, it really reduced the amount of energy and it reduced the heat costs coming in from those tinted windows.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great activity.
We do have one question here, which I imagine there's a clear-cut in. This mandatory or selective?
The standards. Was that the question? You were talking about the standards? Are they mandatory?
The question just says is it.
So I don't know if you want to ask more, but yeah, according to the state website, as of right now, 2020 with the standards, 2022 is the rollout for fall of all the new 2020 standards, which included now climate change that we shared for every subject except math and English explicitly.
And they're embedded within what they're teaching already. So it's just a matter of seeing where it's fitting in and how it works with what they're doing for it. So it's not like drastic changes with some of the standards.
Oh, it was clarified. Is the curriculum for September mandatory?
I believe, and I can't speak for the Department of Ed, but I believe it's going to be over a period of years to show some progress in implementing the standards throughout. And like Brielle said, it's going to be embedded into those other standards, and there will probably be looking for how climate change is utilized within those standards, whether it's history or physical education, all of that.
Yeah, and it's really about thinking, too, what the teachers are already teaching and how you can use climate change as an example, or looking through what you're teaching and looking at it through a climate change lens.
Yeah, as opposed to, okay, just because there's new standards doesn't mean there's this whole new curriculum that's set that all the schools need to be teaching. That's not as much the case. So that also addressed another question regarding what does this replace curriculum wise, right? It need not be replacing other curriculum per se if it's sort of in laying on top and enriching what's already being taught.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it, David, is an enriching. And yes, the schools will be tweaking what they have based on the standards that have been provided. The way I look at it is this is an opportunity to engage the students in real world Jersey specific situations within those standards.
It's making it problem-based learning for the students is what it's helping to do, which is hugely beneficial for them.
Absolutely. And if you look at the pedagogy of problem-based learning or project-based learning, times that I've been doing it, it's really engaging for the students and they really get into it. And it helps them learn those standards better because they're engaging in the real world situations, which are more relevant and meaningful to the student. Mm-hmm. So I look at this as an opportunity, not as something else we have to do.
Yeah, and I'll just say a little bit about the opportunity part because there's another comment about we're always adding new concepts onto adding on to teachers' play. I'm very sympathetic with that. I would also just take a step back here and say it's not as though DOE or anyone, we didn't invent climate change. I mean, the topic is here. It's one of the most important topics of our time. And it really is a matter of whether or not we want to educate youth on really relevant modern topics in today's world, when a lot of people are saying what's being taught in schools isn't all that relevant, or kids get turned off and get disengaged with school because they don't see the relevance. So what is the alternative? The alternative is we don't educate children on this issue. So I think it is important to take a step back and really think about what's going on here in the larger picture.
Yeah, well said, David. I totally agree with that. When our food systems or our food security is, we're in jeopardy, ecosystems are in jeopardy because of our technology and our ingenuity, it's time to start thinking about in different ways and coming up with different solutions and doing technology different and planning and looking at waste management differently, looking at producing energy differently. So these are all relevant.
I mean, if there were an opportunity to educate about pandemics before COVID-19 came along, would have we? I mean, I don't know. We're sort of in this phase of hopping from one crisis to another, and if there are opportunities to teach about potential crises before they happen, are those important opportunities? So these are broader questions, obviously, and but then again, this is our introductory session, so we have plenty of time to go into the science of it as well. So I think at this level, it's maybe not a bad thing that there are a lot of questions on this broader level that people are asking. So,
and this is evolving as well too. We will all be learning and we'll be learning from each other too, as the schools roll out some of their activities and as professional development kicks in, we'll be hearing more about, the challenges and success stories as well. Okay, where are we here? So it's Eddie, are you taking this one, or Carrie?
Sure, if you can click at the link, why are we here? That's something we use. This is from a documentary of students. Oops, the first link. Sorry, John.
I thought that was a cool link to click on. I wanted to see the video.
We'll do both, I promise.
No, I know. I was just a little anxious. Sorry.
So this is a video. You actually don't have to play the video, but it's a video showing how kids are suing the U.S. government for climate change, and they're acting as activists in the video and what they're doing and how they feel. Because one of the teachers asked, how do we get kids motivated? And kind of like Dave said, this is thrust upon the students. I would say they're pretty motivated to learn about the topic already. In general, so I believe that that video kind of shows how are demanding a climate recovery plan. Students are demanding climate change action from government. They're thinking about what can we do to actually improve our society, is the point of that video. And then the next video is that John clicked on first. I'm gonna go back. Is our
So, just a comment on that, Eddie, that video is, I do believe some of the students in our schools are going to be advocates and take on some of those roles beyond what's being taught in the classroom. They're going to get really into this. From my time in the classroom and my 29 years in education, I've seen some kids get really passionate about the environment. So don't be surprised if they're doing some advocacy about the environment, just like that picture showed.
Yeah, I would agree. And then this is just heat changes. So as it gets heat over time, it's an increase compared to the average. The scale is on the top left of the video. So over time, we see that compared to the average, the world is getting warmer. And part of the talk was, what is global warming versus climate change, and why do we have those two different terms, as well as, what is weather versus. So those were kind of key terms that I shared with the teachers. And this is an example of, just kind of basic climate of how the climate has changed with the world heating up compared to the average since 1880. And then I think Kara was going to share.
Yeah, thank you. Can you advance the next slide, please, John? So I was tasked to talk a little bit about how climate change is impacting us here in New Jersey. As both John and Eddie mentioned before, it really is a global issue, but it's very much a local issue as well. And it'll really impact all aspects of our life in this state. This figure here kind of shows the impact of temperature and precipitation and sea level rise. Today, I'm going to change it a little bit and talk a little bit about temperature, yes, also precipitation, but more broadly flooding, because flooding is a big issue that we experience here in New Jersey. We're already experiencing heavier rains, warmer temperatures, and more coastal flooding. And scientists can expect this to continue throughout the century. And so I'm going to try to keep this brief because we'll have other sessions on this topic. And I encourage you to check those out as well. Next slide, please, John. So warming is really one of the principal indicators of climate change, and broadly speaking, New Jersey has followed the global trend. Our annual mean temperature here in New Jersey over the last century has increased about 2.9 degrees Fahrenheit, which if it doesn't maybe not seem like a very large increase, but if you think about your body temperature, for example, when it's 98.6 versus when it's 101.5, that's a major difference. You feel a difference in these changes. And in general, our summers are warmer and longer. Our winters are shorter and warmer. I always complain that we no longer have fall or spring. It's kind of just winter, summer, winter, summer. And in fact, the 13 warmest years have occurred since 1990, with 2012 being the warmest one on record here in New Jersey. For those of you like myself who like data, this graph is from the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, and it shows the average annual temperature from 1900 to 2020. And so you can see that's definitely this upward trend in temperature. Next slide, please, John. This increase in temperature will also have a major impact on our already crumbling infrastructure. So it's something that's not only important because of what we're going to wear and everything and how we're going to live, but really also our infrastructure as well. Next slide, please. The increase in temperature will also have, as I think was mentioned before, significant impacts on our food supply here in the Garden State, from changes in agriculture to our seafood industry. So warmer temperatures can really stress out our crops and our livestock. And warmer winters mean that harmful insects are active for longer periods of time. And in fact, their populations may not be reduced by the severe winter cold like they were before. Rising temperatures also encourage the northward spread of pests and weeds from southern states. So that can be an issue as well. Next slide, please. Similarly, in a state where fisheries and aquaculture resources contribute more than 1 billion annually to the state's economy, the movement of species northward to cooler oceans, water temperatures can significantly impact our food resources and the overall state economy as well. Next slide, please. So this is that slide that John mentioned you'd be seeing again. And again, so along with food and infrastructure, really a major threat is to our public health statewide. Heat stress is a major risk, especially for people with cardiac or respiratory conditions, older adults, young children, pregnant women, and those who work outdoors. Also, longer warm seasons along with the heavy rains promote the growth of allergens like mold, mildew, and pollen. And extreme heat produces a potent form of air pollution that's known as ground level ozone, and this can trigger asthma. So there's a number of respiratory issues as well. Lastly, disease-carrying insects will become a greater risk. So ticks and mosquitoes will be able to thrive, right? Because we'll have this longer period of warm weather and heavy rains. And in fact, the range of certain vector-borne illnesses like Lyme, West Nile, and chikungunya has also already been shown to be changing. And there's thoughts that this will continue. Next slide, please. So lastly, sea level rise is caused mainly by this warming. In warming the ocean, it causes the water to expand, right? And so this is triggering more intense and frequent coastal floodings during storms, and even causes what people refer to as sunny day or nuisance flooding during normal high tides. The sea level rise here in New Jersey will not only impact different species, but also where we can live, right? And where we can build. So this is a slide that shows seaside heights and some projections that were put together on what will happen over the next until 2100. And as you can see with the light blue, that's all water that will be encroaching into seaside heights. And in fact, here in New Jersey, our sea level is rising about twice the global average. And it's projected to rise another 1 to 4 feet by 2100, excuse me. And that's got some geological reasons for that as well. Next slide.
Not a good time to buy oceanfront property.
Yeah, exactly. So we were talking about Somerset County before. So speaking of water, precipitations patterns here in New Jersey have really also changed a lot over time and will continue to do so. Even though we have precipitation changes from year to year, the overall total trend in precipitation, hard word to say, has trended upward 2.9 inches per century since about 1900. And 2018 was the wettest year on record. So we have more intense downpours and a greater risk of flooding along these inland streams and rivers. And here are some pictures that I borrowed from Dr. David Robinson, our state climatologist, which kind of shows some of our more extreme flooding. But along with these, we also have to be aware again that there's going to be this just increase in general nuisance flooding. And that kind of is highlighted in the picture on the right there. Next slide, please. So despite this overall change and increase in precipitation, we also will have periodic dry spells, and they're expected to continue and become potentially more frequent. And this is a serious threat to our water utilities, including loss of our water supply and poor source water quality. And it also impacts our agricultural resources as well. Next slide, please. So now that I've delivered all the doom and gloom, I don't really want to be a Debbie Downer there. So, but what I wanted to really share was to give you a sense, as mentioned before, about how climate change is more than just science. It impacts all elements of our lives in New Jersey, and it can be really used to engage our students in place-based systems thinking. I also want to emphasize that while there is concern, we should feel optimistic for the future. Work is already being done throughout the state to mitigate or reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that are released into the air through things like renewable energy or reducing food waste. And we're also working here in New Jersey to adapt so we can respond better to the to current and future conditions and become more resilient. Next slide, please. So, oh, sorry, this is an animation slide. I don't know why I did that. Thank you. So really, in addition to what's already being done, your schools and students have the opportunity to really utilize and build upon these strategies so that we can prevent the most severe impacts of climate change from happening. So you can increase, feel free to go through, just hit return. We can increase knowledge, right, which is what we're talking about today, sharing the standards and sharing information with our students and really engaging them in this systems thinking to design solutions. We can work on mitigation, reducing emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. So we can implement things in our schools that help to do this by, again, like solar panels or eliminating food waste. We could work towards adaptation, increasing, making our existing infrastructure more resilient, making sure that our schools and where we're building are or either building our schools up or making sure they're not going to flood. And again, as was mentioned before, really fostering these leadership and informed citizenship skills in our students. So empowering them to raise awareness of the challenges and to really support climate-friendly policies or activities. And that was, next slide, please. Yeah, and yeah, so that's that. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And I also wanted to say, definitely keep your eyes open for the next few sessions, because I think we'll go into that, all of this, and especially solutions a lot more in future sessions.
We do actually have one question. Do you think that this has contributed to the spread of the emerald ash borer?
That is a wonderful question that I do not know the answer to, but I can find out for you. I mean, it's very possible, because definitely, I mean, maybe somebody else knows. I don't mean to jump in, but I know definitely there's this migration of species as our seasons have been changing. But I'm not sure about that particular species. That's a good question, though.
Thank you, Carrie. So I just wanted to mention this real quick in terms of climate change. Steam Tank, for those of you who are not familiar with Steam Tank, it is run by New Jersey School Boards Association in collaboration with the U.S. Army and others as well. It is a challenge that students have the opportunity to invent something new or modify existing products and solve real world problems, all through the lens of climate change and sustainability. And Brielle has been a judge for and has witnessed the students, and every single one of their presentations has been their own creation, and they've always included the climate change and environment in every one of whatever they are doing. So
Those are huge. The climate change part is huge, or like the sustainability. The kids have done excellent with tying that in to the ones that I've gotten to judge, which is awesome.
yeah, so if, we talked about STEM and STEAM and integrative STEAM and STEM, and this is a way to engage your students in, in a real nice way to do it. What is supported by mentorship and also subject matter experts and the judges that support the students along the way. So just wanted to just bring that up as something that your school can do. We've been doing this we're going on to our 7th season. Well, actually 6th. We missed one because of COVID. We had to cancel. We have quite a number of schools involved in it, over 350 teams right now that we're in the process of judging. So just keep this in mind when you're looking to engage students in a real nice way in a design challenge. So these are our next dates in the series. We're going to do a basic climate science 101. And, I don't know exactly how many board members are on here, but some board members are also teachers. But if there's teachers on here and want to learn more about it, there's going to be plenty of opportunities, not just what we're doing here with these dates, but there's going to be quite a bit of education going on to support districts along the way on implementing the climate standards.
We also have a couple more questions in the chat feature. One person is asking, are we teaching students the impact, the economic impact of climate change?
Yeah, I would say that's kind of a lot of what the new standards are trying to do, is to kind of have them think beyond the science and how it will impact the economy. And so really broadening out to think about how it will impact everything.
And they also are asking, are we encouraging a reduction in consumption to reduce waste and emissions?
I would say if you look at that drawdown that was mentioned earlier, so drawdown is all about drawing down and like how to reduce energy. And number one used to be refrigeration and refrigerants, and now it is reducing food waste and the whole food cycle and plant-based diets and all of that. If you eat a cow, 90% of energy is lost. If you eat the plants the cow eats and you have a plant-based diet, you're saving a lot of energy. So I think that's one of the conversations that comes up a lot with kids. And then I would also mention what Carrie said, economics, we talk about the Jersey Shore, and someone mentioned Manahawkin before, adding sand to rebuild the area, and how much does it cost to add sand, and how much does LBI spend, $1 million a year to add sand, that's going to be eroded away. Because the kids are like, oh, we'll just add more sand. But what does that mean? What does that look like to just add more sand? It has to come from somewhere. What are the economics with that? Who's doing that? So those are all conversations I've had in class with kids.
Do we have any more questions?
I'm not seeing any more questions right now. So John, I don't know if you have in our other, I don't know if you have some final thoughts or.
Yeah, I think there is. Are there grants available for districts to apply in order to fund these projects?
Oh, that just came in. Must have just come in.
So I would say Sustainable Jersey. I don't know if John, you were gonna say Sustainable Jersey. I know as a science supervisor in Princeton, we had Sustainable Jersey grants for $10,000, $2,000 per school. So that was a pretty good funding source.
Sustainable Jersey for schools they do have grants. They have actually quite a bit of money coming in for grants, small grants, up to $10,000. A lot of schools have actually received the money already. And they have grant cycles. You just have to keep your eye on the grant cycles that come around from them. That is one source. I believe the New Jersey Natural Gas also has some conservation kind of grants that come in every now and then. So one of the things that school boards did back in 2012 is we were looking at sustainability in terms of the district level and what you could do to conserve energy and reduce. That actually would, if you save money by looking at some of the actions you can do in your school, that money could be redirected into school improvement or some of these initiatives that you might want to consider. So keep in mind, when you do sustainable actions in your school, you will be saving money. As long as you benchmark it. Energy is a big one. I know that, like, the Green Ribbon School Awards banquet was last night in one school. They were saving, like, I don't know, they went from spending like 3.4 million on energy down to like 1.9 million on energy use just by conservation methods in energy only. That wasn't even looking at the other systems in the school, like waste reduction, green purchasing, things like that. So if you want to look at it from a board perspective, the more that you can strategize on how to sustainabilize your school and benchmark it and train the people in the building, the students, the teachers, the facility directors, on how to operate the building more efficiently, and you're saving money over a period of time, that money doesn't have to come from grants, it comes from savings, and that could be redirected into initiatives that are going to continually improve your school. So just keep that in mind moving forward. What is PD, professional development? Professional, okay, you answered that, sorry, never mind, just read it.
Yeah, I'm currently not seeing anything else in the chat. I know we've had some comments bouncing back and forth with speakers answering people directly with some comments and questions. If there are any more, feel free to enter them in the chat feature.
And that's okay if we're done a couple of minutes early, which we are, and we've talked a lot, and that's great. So, and if
Can you
anybody
hear
has, yes, yeah, please.
I'm sorry, I'm on my phone in the car because I had to drop off, but so I can't write in the chat. But I wanted to know if all of the links would be available in the chat. Like, are we going to get a copy of the chat? Is there a way to do that?
Most of the information is going to be in the slide deck.
Okay,
And-
great.
And if you want to send me an email, I will, since you're on your phone, I will send you the link to the Google, well, it's a Google slide deck. So I'm happy to do that. Just send me an email.
I've gotten Google Slide. I was home and then I had to leave, so I switched devices. That's why. So I can't get to the chat right now, but that's why I was just curious.
Okay, yeah, please feel free.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up, but please
Thank
feel
you.
free, anybody who's on today, please feel free to reach out to me via email. And I'm happy to share information on anyone who is on the call today or any information about what we talked about in greater detail. So
it might be a setting within Zoom. I think right now, because most of us are just attendees in a webinar, we don't actually have the option to save the chat. When it's a regular meeting as opposed to a webinar, there's a button that lets you save the chat. So maybe that can be set up by you and Jen for the next one, John.
thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
For a quick fix, if anyone wants to do it, entails a little bit more work, but if you can actually highlight the entire chat, copy it, and if you're at a computer, you can copy and paste it into a Word doc.
I did that. Thank you.
Which I just did too. So if anybody doesn't have access to the chat, I copied and pasted into an email. I will document that as well. Okay, so if we don't have any more questions, any other final comments from any of our presenters today? If not, any other comments from attendees? And if not, then it's time for dinner. And I would just want to thank everybody for attending today on our first of, the series. Again, we're going to dive in a little bit deeper into climate change, and we'll bring in some additional partners as we move forward so they can also share additional resources and things that are going on in the state. And again, this is New Jersey specific. So thank you for attending today, everyone. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone.
No, thank everybody for being here today and just sharing the information, all the great work that everybody's doing. And thank you, Tom, for moderating. Appreciate your time today as well.
No problem. And if it's okay with you, John, I'm going to stop recording and end the webinar. Is that okay?
It is okay with me to stop the recording. Don't click out of it yet because I want to make sure that I have the chat and everything that's in there. But yes, stop.